More than any other time in the past, we need to connect ourselves and children with nature and the environment. My name is Kevin O'Shea, and I'm an environmental educator who wants to connect all of you with a bit of inspiration. In each episode of the Nature Talks podcast, I'll talk to incredible educators, scientists, thinkers, and innovators who are connecting those around them to nature and the outdoors and inspiring new generations of environmental stewards. Well, hey there, folks, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Nature Talks podcast. That's right, we're starting season 2 of the podcast, and we've got a lot of exciting content coming your way this year, and I can't wait. And we're going to start right now because I can't wait. And with episode number 11 of the podcast. Now, this is a podcast that's all about connecting people with nature, with the environment, teaching people about living more sustainably, and basically helping heal the world that is in such of a mess right now, to be honest. And one of the beautiful things of living in 2022 is that we have the technology to talk to people all around the world. Now, I am here based in Shenzhen, China, which is right across the water from Hong Kong. And in this episode and so many other episodes, I will be talking to inspirational people from around the world. And to start off our new season, I couldn't think of someone better to talk to than Kenny Peavy. Now, Kenny is an incredibly inspirational educator, and I will be using the word inspirational a lot this season because so many of the people I talk to are incredible and doing amazing things. Now, Kenny is based in Indonesia at the moment, and he works in Bali at a place that many of you have heard of. He works at a school called the Green School Bali, which many people know of as a school that, you know, is an eco school, and they do a lot of innovative things with regards to sustainability, sustainable living, fostering a care for the environment, a care for nature, and a lot of those wonderful things that we need people, values that we need people to have these days. Now, Kenny was cool enough to come by the podcast and stop by and share his experiences as an outdoor educator, and he has worked extensively throughout Asia and the United States as an outdoor educator, connecting students and leaders and teachers with the outdoors. He's also a writer, and he's written books on this topic, and he's going to talk a little bit about a new storybook that he has written all about connecting people with the outdoors. So let's just jump right into this and sit back and enjoy my conversation with Kenny Peavy, who is an outdoor educator, curriculum developer at Green School Bali. Oh, well, folks, welcome to another episode of the Nature Talks podcast. And today I'm very happy to have with me Kenny Peavy. And Kenny is the head of curriculum and learning at Green Camp Bali and the head of Adventure English as a second language program at Green School Bali. He's also an award winner, an advocate for outdoor learning, environmental learning. He's done some pretty impressive things with the bamboo bicycle and kayaking. He's also an author, and he's got so many accomplishments. It's very impressive. Kenny, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks, Kevin. You definitely make me sound good. Thanks for that intro.
Oh, not a problem at all. Not a problem. I'm very happy to have you here to help kind of kick off the season 2 of the Nature Talks podcast in a big way. This year, I'm looking forward to just having a lot of great content out to inspire teachers out around the world to get their kids outdoors and get themselves outdoors and, continue with the movement, grow the movement. Kenny, first of all, it's looking very tropical where you are.
Yes.
And I guess I've already mentioned where you are at the moment, but I was wondering if you could tell the listeners just a little bit about yourself, where you're from, how you got into education, and how you ended up where you are now.
All right. Yeah, I'm originally from Georgia, USA, from the States. I've been living and working overseas for about 23 years now. I got into education. I basically I grew up playing outdoors. So I was really active outside. Anything from, checking out the creeks, flipping over logs, trying to catch crayfish. So I just had a childhood outdoors, which got me really curious in biology. So I ended up going to university to study biology and try to figure out how nature works. Like, I really wanted to know what were the secrets of how these stream ecosystems work, or these forest ecosystems work, or what makes them, tick. How do they keep perpetuating? Why are they there? What, all these big questions. And that led to, discovering a bit more about that in biology. But then I realized pretty quickly I didn't want to be a scientist. I didn't want to collect data or work in a lab. And I really had this passion for being outdoors and nature and science. So after that, I decided to try out teaching, so that was like in 1997. I've been teaching ever since. Went on to get the teaching degree and taught in a couple of public schools in the States. But I was really fortunate because I had sort of an ecology, biology background, grew up my whole life playing outdoors. I kind of bridged the gap between classroom teaching and nature education, outdoor education. So I was really fortunate. I got a job in California working at like an outdoor science school. And then I was working at a nature center in Georgia, back in Athens, Georgia, at University of Georgia. And then after a couple of years of that, I was like, let's go travel and have an adventure. So I ended up overseas. And that's kind of a roundabout way of how I ended up in these international schools. Mostly just a desire to explore cultures, explore rainforests, have an adventure, get out and see what the world was all about.
Nice. So you're currently in Southeast Asia, and have you spent that international portion of your career in that region in Southeast Asia?
Yes, basically the whole time. So I started out at international school, Kuala Lumpur, Mont Kiara International School. So I was in Malaysia for about 14 or 15 years.
Oh, wow.
And then the last, I guess, 9 or 10 years, I've been in Bali.
Okay.
But one of the things that, is made it a little bit different. I was a classroom science teacher at ISKL, also at Mont Kiara. I started out at Mont Kiara teaching ESL. So that was kind of how this connection back to Green School and Green Camp will come in later. But my first year teaching, they didn't have a science job. And they said, if you teach ESL and get a certification, we can hire you. So, of course, I said, yes, I want a job. And it was one of the best things I ever did. I took an ESL course in Thailand back in the days when, I think if you've been around a while, there were days about 15 or 20 years ago when quite a few universities were offering PD and, master's degrees and teaching certificates in Thailand.
Oh, okay.
So I jumped on that. I went to one of the courses from the University of Washington and got my ESL certification and thought, okay, this will come in handy if I want to live and work overseas.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, 20 years later, I'm head of the Adventure ESL program. So it's always been this sort of serendipitous journey, not really a purposeful journey, but
it's interesting how the journey can take us through different paths. And, I myself, started in education back in 2002, and I became an English teacher, and I was in South Korea for about 5 years doing that. And I didn't have a certification. I had a BA. Before that, I worked in Canada, actually, in video games. I was a developer. I was a 3D artist, actually, which no connection at all to kind of what I do now. But I developed that love for the teaching. So at the time, as a Canadian, it's much cheaper, much more affordable to go to university in Canada than elsewhere. But there were, in the early 2000s, there was nowhere where I could get a degree online. It just wasn't something that was offered at the time. I think at that time, you'd see advertisements all the time popping up in your Yahoo Mail for University of Phoenix.
I remember that one. Yeah,
the University of Phoenix was everywhere. So I ended up having to go back to Canada in order to get my elementary teaching degree. I had to go back to school physically, boots on the ground, and I did that. And then I spent my whole career in Northeast Asia, Japan, and now China. And ironically enough, I've had that passion. And those who know me, I mean, my passion in life has been connecting children with nature and trying to connect my colleagues. but I didn't have the piece of paper that said that part. Science has been my passion. I, like you, grew up outdoors. So I grew up in rural Eastern Canada.
Right.
But I didn't have that piece of paper, and that's unfortunately come to cause me issues in the past when I've been in the job market and I'm up against other people where I have more experience and more knowledge, but I didn't have the piece of paper. Ironically enough, I just finished. I'm currently taking courses in environmental education from Queen's University in Canada, and I just finished one certification course in environmental education. So I'm what they would call an environmental educator now. I'm using air quotes. On paper. I always have been, but now I have that on paper, and I'm continuing those studies now too. I've got another course starting shortly, just because I don't think I've studied anything in a long time that's really excited me as much. Because every day when I sit down in front of my little Moodle online, I'm digging into stuff that I love desperately. So it's pretty cool. Yeah.
No, that's awesome.
Yeah. That's
great to hear your story. We definitely share a lot in common. So that's nice to hear.
Yeah. So, now here I am, in my mid 40s and I'm back in school again and away online. But again, sometimes we need that piece of paper that just says, yeah. Because some people look for that, that's the thing I've heard before when I've been up, a few years back. It's like the board of directors want someone who has that piece of paper. You've had an admin who's like, I want to hire you, but there's, I have to kind of adhere to the restrictions of those above me.
Right. No, that's true. And I think I was just reading online a lot of visas require it if you're going to work overseas. So just to get the work permit or the visa, they'll require that piece of paper.
Well, see, for me, like I of course have a teaching degree and a teaching license, but I don't have that environmental ed one. So it's that specific one. Yeah. So I'm curious, you're at Green School, and you said you've been there for a fair number of years. And, I think for those in the education world, there's definitely many who've heard of Green School, and there may be some listening to this podcast who don't know what Green School is. I was just wondering, in a nutshell, if you could just let us know what makes where you are now different than other schools you've been at, or others, the other typical international schools you'd find in the region.
Right. Yeah. And so just to backtrack a little bit and add the last bit of that puzzle. So about 10 years ago, I left classroom teaching and I started working in outdoor education, basically leading trips, and expeditions, education outside the classroom, week without walls type things for various schools throughout the region, mostly in Thailand and Indonesia. And that is an important piece of the puzzle because then right before COVID, like literally 3 years ago, I decided I was kind of tired of traveling. I'd been leading trips all over Southeast Asia. I had, a wife and daughter I wanted to spend more time with. So I wanted to get back into the classroom and be a bit more stable and steady in one place. It's pretty awesome to travel and live that lifestyle of, leading hikes and rafting and taking kids on these adventures and Chiang Mai, Sulawesi, Sumatra, Tioman Island, all kinds of cool places. But then at some point I wanted to get back and settle down. So that's when I, my wife's Indonesian and we were living in Bali at the time. And so I just started looking around and I applied to Green School. In fact, it's another one of those serendipitous journeys. I was actually with United World College, Southeast Asia, the school based in Singapore. I was leading their trip up in Chiang Mai for their 8th grade. And one of their outdoor ed people said, hey, Green Camp is looking for some people, maybe a director or an educator. So I got in touch with somebody, a friend of a friend of a friend. And that's kind of how it works in this international circuit is, somebody knows somebody and you're all connected in that way. And so I just kind of on a whim, but also kind of wanted to see if I could get back into a classroom. And lo and behold, they hired me. So I've been here ever since.
Nice.
COVID changed everything because the Green Camp was catering to a lot of international schools that would come to Bali. And back to your question, I think what makes it different is the campus is bamboo. It's all open air. We don't have any, closed buildings. And it's basically a large campus with all of these bamboo classrooms, and next door is a camp. So we get a lot of schools visiting, a lot of people come. And in that sense, even today, now that the borders are opening up, people are coming to tour the Green School. They just want to see these, huge bamboo structures that are classrooms that teachers are teaching in. So that's one thing, is the physical property or facility is a lot different. We have permaculture gardens, we have a river, we have forests on our campus, we have chickens, pigs, and cows. Things you don't typically find at an international school or
for sure.
Most schools.
Yeah.
So that's one big difference. It's an open air campus. Everything's made out of bamboo. Everything has a sustainability twist to it. In fact, like the toilets are composting toilets. There's no running water in the toilets. All of our food is vegetarian or plant-based, for sustainability reasons. Mm-hmm. And then literally outside your classroom is a garden that you can teach in, or a bit of a forest or a stream. So
amazing.
In a lot of ways, if someone like you and me, that would be our dream. Like we could teach something in a classroom and then step right outside and see it or do it, So that's what gets me excited. And more than once, for me, this is a pro, but for some people it's a con. I'm teaching a lesson and a lizard drops from the ceiling or a snake crawls through the classroom. And so, your lesson, the dynamics of the lesson changes pretty quickly.
Yeah.
When suddenly you've got this happened last term, a flying lizard, a gliding lizard dropped right from the ceiling on the floor right in front of me. So I picked it up and taught a lesson on it because, that's what you do. It's
exactly. Yeah.
I didn't plan on it, but whatever I was teaching, no one's going to listen. So suddenly those teachable moments, it's like, okay, we have a visitor today. It's a flying lizard. That's
amazing. I get you there.
And I think what makes it kind of cool as well, the curriculum is a lot different. So not only is the physical, facility and structures different, but that, sort of begs that the curriculum can't be a standard curriculum because you can do a lot of things, just by stepping outside your classroom. So I think some of the notable things that we do here is we definitely focus, a lot on sustainability, environmental education, and, integrating the local culture, the Balinese culture, as well as social entrepreneurship. So, some of the things that we do here that I really appreciate is every day at 2:00, there's a gong that rings and every single person on campus miraculously stops and has a mindfulness moment for a couple of minutes. And it's just one of those magical things that is part of the culture. So everyone does it. And if there's someone not doing it, suddenly the kids are like, shh, shh, quiet. If you don't hear the gong or for whatever reason, you don't know what time it is, it's just built into the culture. And I think that's pretty cool. Like everyone knows that when you hear that gong, stop what you're doing, have a gratitude moment or a mindfulness moment, and then 3 minutes later, carry on. So I think that's a cool aspect. Another really cool one, I think, is every Wednesday we have off campus, at least, in the middle school where I teach. We call it jalan-jalan, which in Indonesian means wander around, go for a walk, go exploring.
Okay.
And the kids can sign up for all kinds of courses, anything from surfing class to scuba diving class to, going to work on some sort of social entrepreneurship class. So every Wednesday it's off schedule, off calendar. So you basically sign up for whatever interests you. And for the kids, I think it's really cool because if you really are into scuba diving, you can get certified. And then of course we tie that into coral reef restoration or some sort of sustainability issue. Mm-hmm. And surfing is more of a life skills. You can get certified in surf rescue, which I personally think is an awesome skill that everyone should learn, some sort of first aid or rescue skills, especially going, outside or outdoors. And then if you're interested in other things like social entrepreneurship, then you can take a class in that. And they'll go and join a local village and see what they're doing. So that's another cool aspect. For me also, the last term, in the middle school, we do what we call integrated study units. So it's basically 2 weeks, and they sign up for a course that's 4 hours a day every day for 2 weeks. And so for that one, it's meant to be multidisciplinary. Kids can sign up based on their interest. And so the one I taught personally was called Wilderness Survival.
Oh, wow.
Which I thought was a lot of fun. So we did shelter building, we did water purification, we did how to tie knots, we did, what else did we do? Basically life skills, outdoor skills. Yeah. And it's probably the only time you'll ever hear a teacher at the school ask the kids if they have their knife. Because that was like, they were allowed to bring like a Swiss Army knife or a survival knife to campus for my course. And,
don't forget your knife, kids. Don't forget that knife. If you don't have your knife, you go back home and you get that knife.
So it's definitely a lot different than I think, at an urban school where that would not be allowed. But, and some kids really get excited about it. And I was really happy and surprised that a lot more females signed up for that course than males. So I had a lot of middle school girls that were excited to learn cooking skills, knot tying skills, shelter building skills.
That's an interesting thing. And I mean, I can only speak anecdotally to this, and I don't have a lot of experience with middle and high school because I am a primary teacher. And I don't know if there's maybe more of that kind of interest and sustainability of this or that. But for example, like last year, we started a beekeeping program at my school and our middle and high school. And like where I am right now, we've got 6 beehives on the roof, which after this interview, I'm going to be popping upstairs to check on the bees. Because that's kind of something that I've adopted as that's going to be kind of my project. And I'm going to be kind of running that in the next school year. But in our beekeeping club, for the majority of the year, we didn't have any boys in our club. We had about a dozen girls who were just incredible. So gung-ho, so excited. And I'll admit it with anyone when they're dealing with bees for the first time, so brave, like just risk it. Not scared at all. Nice. I had a lot more trepidation when I was dealing with bees initially than they did, for sure. And as the year progressed, we did get a few guys in on it, but basically it's run by girls. And I think that's fantastic because
that's very cool.
They've got a real passion for that sustainability piece.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. And, back to mine. So mine was more of a wilderness, ISU, integrated study unit, but they also offered things like learning about the biosphere. And so they went to the Biosphere Project in West Bali. There were some that were doing like sustainable chocolate. So they would go to like some chocolate factory. So I think that's a really cool thing that we can do here, just because of where we are, that a lot of people can't do, because you're far away. And I think the last one that I've had personal experience with that I'll mention is teaching a thematics unit. And so we really try to integrate different topics. So because I do math and I do science and I do ESL and I do outdoor ed, that's for me is sort of my bread and butter. I can integrate math and science and outdoor experiential ed. But the thematics unit was all about, and this was another direction. So it was not related to nature, outdoors in that sense of wilderness, but it was like they had to design a sustainable product and they had to design it from cradle to cradle. So we looked at circular economies and the UN SDGs and how most products are cradle to grave, from the design to fabrication to consumption to the landfill. So we looked at linear economies, but then we looked at circular economies, how it goes from design to fabrication to production to consumption to repurposing to redesigning to refabricating. So you're kind of creating a circular loop, an economy that's not linear. So it's cradle to cradle. And that was really cool. Some of the, kids really got into it and designed some really cool products. And for me, that's a pretty valuable life skill that, we never know. We plant the seeds in middle school, and we don't know if they're going to come on later to be social entrepreneurs, or actually maybe they will become designers in the future. So I think that's a cool thing that we can do here, just because of the type of curriculum we have.
Yeah. Well, I've been following on Twitter for a little while, and that's how we connected, through Twitter. And one thing to all of you guys out there listening, I'll always advocate for educators to be on Twitter. It's a great place to build your PLN. It's a great place to network and just meet other educators. And you're talking about all these incredible things of how kids there at Green School are getting connected with, circular, learning about the economy, learning about more sustainable economies, learning about the wilderness, biodiversity, all that stuff. But you and I send similar messages out to the world, or try to, through Twitter, to educators and whoever is listening. It's kind of a sounding horn, hey, if you're listening, look at this.
Right.
Why would you say, and I know that's, we do have a broad listenership, and maybe people who are new to this or newer to this and looking for answers to things, but why, for you personally, are you so passionate about connecting kids with the outdoors? Big question.
Well, yeah, big question. Like I said, it's all connected. So growing up outdoors, playing outside my whole life, and I sometimes when I give talks or talk to teachers, I always say, how many of you grew up playing outdoors until the street lights came on and your mom or dad was screaming your name from the porch? And mostly it's older folks like us, in our 40s, 50s, even late 30s. But kids nowadays, they're not getting that sort of childhood. They're not getting that free range kid roam around the neighborhood until dark, no adults around, playing on their own. And that, when I was a kid, that's how everyone grew up. We just played outside. We never saw our adults. We'd come home from school, we'd change clothes, we'd run out the door, and then we'd come back at dark. I think that's really valuable for kids, and kids will do it naturally if we let them. They'll just go and play on their own. But if they can't, like nowadays, more people live in these urban areas where they don't have that opportunity. They live in apartments or condos where they don't have a national park or a state park or a wild area nearby. So their sort of free time is spent at malls, or, on devices, or playing video games, or watching, YouTube or whatever. And they're missing that sort of chance to connect with nature. They don't have that opportunity. So that's why I got really passionate about it. And I have been, ever since I started teaching, I've always had some sort of nature club or hiking club or, science club that explored nature, just for that reason, just to maybe plant the seed and give them some opportunity to know what it's like to grow up flipping over logs, playing in the creek, playing in the rain, jumping in mud puddles, things that I think kids are meant to do. But if you do live in a developed or urban area, you just don't have that opportunity. Everything is developed or paved or manicured, or a mall. So that's the main reason. I just want kids to be able to be kids, play outside. Yeah,
no, absolutely. We preach into the choir here. It just sounds exactly like everything I'm passionate about. And it's so I'd like to kind of step over to the world of advice, because I often ask teachers who come on these episodes to just share experiences and knowledge. So if you were speaking to a group of educators who are maybe in America, maybe they're in a big city, they're in London, they're somewhere in the world where they don't have access to those things. They're educators who understand, at least, they understand, it's important. I should be connecting kids with the outdoors. It isn't, look at climate change, look at the fires that are happening in Portugal right now, and in Spain and in Canada and the United States, wildfires, due to climate change. I know I should be doing these things, but I don't know how to start, because, most schools don't have outdoor education programs. Right. To be honest, I'm in my 20th year of teaching. I've never worked in a school that had an actual proper outdoor education program. So for those educators, maybe like a primary school educator who's wondering, where can I start? What advice would you give to them?
Well, there's a couple of different ways. Even when I lived in Kuala Lumpur, it's pretty developed urban area, but you can still get outside, if not on a daily basis, at least on sort of a weekly basis. So I think, just knowing where those places are and how to access them. So it's either a national park or a state park or some sort of vacant lot or wild area. Quite a few schools have that sort of land, but they don't use it as a garden or a field. They use it as just sort of a grass lawn. So I think that's one thing to think about, is just where are these areas? Things grow between the cracks. Even if you're in an urban area, there's going to be some place. And, I've spent a lot of time in Singapore. Singapore is a very green city. And in the middle of the roads, they have these greenways. So I think almost every urban area has access to something, whether it's a park or a vacant lot or even a nature center. That's where I was teaching for a while. A lot of nature centers or museums will have these kind of cool things that you can do. So I think that's one piece of advice. Just seek those out and look for them because they're there. They may not be easy or obvious, and that's sort of the issue. It might take extra time, extra effort, but you could do it, depending on your schedule, you can do it weekly or monthly or quarterly, some sort of trip where you have to get off campus and go see these things. I think almost every urban area outside of that urban area will have some sort of recreational place that you can go. And that's key. Just finding that place. The hard thing that I totally and completely understand is it might take a whole day. Like you might have to dedicate a day to it. It's not like you can just step outside your classroom and walk outside and come right back in. It's going to be, a time issue, dedicating the time for it. But it really is worth it. You get the kids outside, and that's what kids are meant to do, is they're meant to play outdoors. They're meant to explore. They're naturally curious, as you well know, working with the young kids in primary. They'll find things. They'll ask what things are. They'll discover things on their own, which kind of leads to the next one, which is you don't have to be an expert. You don't have to be a biology teacher or a science teacher or an outdoor ed teacher. You just have to be an enthusiastic, curious human being that wants to know, like, what is this? And if you don't know, it's easier than ever to look things up, with Google Image, with iNaturalist, with all kinds of apps. You just take a photo of it, and some Facebook group or some expert in the area can help you identify what it is. So that's easier than ever now, is knowing what you're looking at. But more important than knowing is just being curious. Like, what is this weird thing I just found? It's a crazy looking insect that I've never seen, or it's a flower shape I've never seen, or it's, some sort of lichen or moss growing on a tree on the sidewalk. And that still is a connection to nature, even though it's not as rich or diverse as, walking through a forest. It still counts. And I think we can't discount those sort of teachable moments with our own kids and with our students, which I think leads to the third point, which I really think is true, is it's not just up to teachers. It really is a parent's job to get their kids outdoors and get their kids, curious about nature and get their kids exposed to these natural areas. And I think if you can somehow spread that message within your community, because I think oftentimes as teachers, we assume that role, that responsibility of like, it's our job to get kids outdoors. And I think that's true. But I also think it's even more true that parents need to be doing this. They need to have picnics, bike rides. You don't have to have your birthday party in a restaurant or a mall. You can have it at a park, with some blankets. So I think looking for these alternatives are really important. And, that would be my three sort of key piece of advice. Look for the opportunities because they're there. Don't feel like you have to be an expert. just be curious and excited and enthusiastic. And as we know, there's nothing more powerful than saying, I don't know, let's find out. And I do that all the time. There's, stuff I don't know that I just admit to it and look it up later. And then the third one is getting the parents on board. They really do need to have some sort of input into connecting their own kids and their, community to nature, outdoors.
Yeah.
So I think those are three that I kind of think are important.
Yeah, that's great advice. No, absolutely. And I think that's one thing, I think with teachers I've met in the past, sometimes it feels like a lot of work to have to pack up a class and head outside. And I think like one thing that I've seen you mention on Twitter and advocate for on Twitter is about how, why teach something inside when you can teach it outside? Like, when learning outdoors, outdoor learning outdoors. I mean, you can do a read aloud outside in a grassy spot on your campus,
right?
As opposed to just doing it inside your classroom on the carpet. You can do a counting and sorting activity in math with early years outdoors with natural materials, instead of just doing it inside your classroom. And, I think also kind of back to like what you mentioned about finding those places. I can think of when I lived in Japan and we would go, say, for example, to a museum for a unit of inquiry, and we do a field trip. And then afterwards we would always plan and have lunch, and we would always try to find some kind of big grassy area or forested area for the kids to play. And, you let the kids run wild. You'd have 100 kindergarten kids or grade 1 or 2 kids running around. And then when they hop on the bus and they head back to school, whenever we would do our like reflection, like that's like a part of the IB thing, you look at that reflection at the end. It seems like 9 times out of 10, when you say, what was the most memorable part of your field trip? And you're like, initially you're like, okay, we went to this really cool museum. We did this and that. And they'll say, playing in the field afterwards.
Yeah.
That was the best part. You're like, yeah, fair enough.
100% agree. And, the power of that. And this is something I think that we take for granted or we don't pay attention to, but there is so much learning that happens in those moments when we're not teaching, that they're teaching themselves, that are teaching their peers, or they're just being curious about whether it's learning their physical limits, like how fast they can run or how far they can jump. That's a cool thing to learn when you're a first grader. Or, how your friend is faster than you. But also, I've been witnessing it lately. I've taught these kids a few games, and then during free time, I don't teach them. And they'll make up their own games. They'll play their own games or make variations of these games that I've taught them, or that they've learned from other friends. And that's real learning. That's communication skills. That's negotiation skills. Those are a lot of, sometimes what we call the soft skills, leadership skills. Okay, we're going to play this game. And 10 kids will just spontaneously erupt into a game. So I think, there's so much learning that happens there that we don't value or we don't notice or we take for granted because we think, learning in the classroom or academic skills is the only type of learning. But there's a lot more to it.
Well, that kind of bridges into a question that I'd asked you, or I'd shot your way before this interview with the administration piece. I mean, you've kind of given some advice to teachers. And the thing is, sometimes, the teachers may be passionate about getting outdoors, but the administration side of things might not be so passionate, or they might not get the value, or they may be more kind of fixated on those test scores or those assessment scores, or they depending on what kind of school of thought they come from, maybe for them having those kids in the classroom buried in a workshop or something is kind of more what they think is ideal. And obviously, to make something really successful in the school and really kind of beautiful, as far as that kind of environmental learning goes and outdoor learning, you need teachers on board, but you also need supportive administrators. So what would you say to administrators about the importance of the outdoor learning part?
Well, I think the first one is to just educate yourself. There's a lot of research now on so many benefits about outdoor learning, and they range everything from physical benefits, from enhancing or at least not harming or hampering eyesight, because that's a big one that's been happening with kids because they're so used to looking at screens up close, that there's a lot of research now on myopia and getting outdoors and how you need to see things far away and play outside to do that. So that's, and well, childhood obesity. So those are physical sort of benefits, running around and exercising. To, the social emotional benefits, especially now during post-COVID or during COVID, being indoors locked up has not been very beneficial for us at all. But being outside, connecting with other people, connecting with nature, those social emotional benefits are huge. And they, there's lots of research on this now, and you don't have to look far. You just basically Google search benefits of outdoor learning, and it pops up tons
all
of
over. Yeah.
peer reviewed scientific papers that are credible from universities and organizations. And there was one more I was going to mention. Hang on. I mentioned physical. Oh, cognitive. Yeah, because there's quite a few studies now on how teaching and learning outdoors improves test scores. So I think there's some research on that. I think so that's the first one. If you are sort of inclined to want to have some evidence based, then there is research out there.
Yeah.
I think, a next one, I think safety is always going to be a concern for parents and for schools, risk and safety. So get some training, get some knowledge, get some teachers on board with first aid and safety and risk assessments. And that way you can ease the minds of any parents that are concerned. Because I think that's always going to be a question, like, is it safe?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And the answer is yes, it is, especially if you follow things properly and do some site surveys and you have risk assessments or you have people trained in first aid. So I think all those are important for a school and for any organization, really. And then I think having some areas on or around campus and having some, teaching tools that are available that aren't really time consumers. So I have two things in mind. One is you have a person like you that is the expert at the school that helps people, because you're passionate about it, you love it, you enjoy it. So you would be a natural person at your school to be sort of the outdoor guy, the nature guy, have someone at your school that is the nature person that can help.
Yeah.
Or at least have sort of these ready-made kits that are in these bins that are ready to go. So like you mentioned for primary, have a lesson plan that's in the box that's laminated that says you can do these 5 things outdoors. And you may even have some resources in there so a teacher can just grab and go. They don't have to spend a week planning. They can just grab this box. They go out to your field. Hopefully you have sort of a shaded area or something, but make those things available on campus so that teachers are welcome to do it. It's easy. They're inclined to do it. So it really depends on your school, but it could be anything like, okay, let's find 5 different leaf shapes, or like you said, let's do numeracy. Let's count stones. Let's compare the size and shape of different natural objects. All these things are pretty easily done if you have things set up properly, if you have an outdoor space, if you have sort of a shaded area, if you have a bin with a quick lesson plan. And like you said, I really agree. Instead of reading The Very Hungry Caterpillar in your classroom, just walk outside and read it. That counts as learning outdoors. Yeah. And there's benefits to that. It doesn't have to be that nature is the focus. It can be that you're just learning outdoors, what you normally would learn indoors.
Like you said, that part with myopia, I mean, that's often connected not just to screens, but being under fluorescent lights, to be outside. Right. I mean, that's my own daughter has, we had to bring her to an ophthalmologist recently. And that's one thing that the doctor said was make sure she's outside at least 2 hours a day.
Yeah.
And then he said if she's using a device for a while, which certainly happened in the past couple of years with online learning because of COVID, we're based in China. We've had a lot of shutdowns where my kids are spending way more time on a device than I would ever like. The ophthalmologist said, walk out onto your balcony and just outside, like she said, I think after like 20 or 30 minutes on a device, put it down, walk outside of the balcony and just look around for 5 minutes.
Right.
And then come back inside. That was advice from a doctor,
Right. Yeah. And it's interesting that you've had personal experience with that, because I've just read the research papers. And I think it's probably true. And just so people understand, we live at Green School. I'm an outdoor educator, and my daughter still loves to look at her screen. Yeah. It's part of our life now. But she does have so many opportunities to not look at her screen. Yeah. Which I think makes the difference. Like, I'm not trying to keep her from doing that or kill that fun or that instinct or that sort of natural way of learning, because she's learned a lot from YouTube videos. Yeah. Undeniably. Mm-hmm. And I think that's pretty cool. She'll be like, Daddy, did you know this fact? And I'm like, no. Yeah. How did you learn that?
Well, that's where the world is changing, right? That's where the world is changing. My 12-year-old son dreams of becoming a historian. He wants to be he wants to specialize in World War II history, and he would like to work at the Canadian War Museum because his grandpa was a historian, and his knowledge is deep and fascinating. And I'm like, where the heck did you learn all these things? But he's learning them from YouTube documentaries and the infographic show on YouTube and this and that. So kids are they're learning in a different way than we did, right?
Right. Exactly.
But we have to find that balance, right?
That's it. And that's I don't want anyone to feel like I'm definitely not a Luddite. I appreciate technology and what it does for us. And the fact that I'm talking to you from Bali and you're in China and we can do this cool interview, I think that's pretty freaking amazing. Yeah. But like you said, you have to find that balance. So, even though I'm kind of the Green School outdoor teacher guy, my own daughter still spends too much time on her screen. Yeah. So I have to monitor that and say, time to play outside. Yeah. So you have to find that balance.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't want to keep you too much longer. So what I want to do is I want to just jump over to the point that you're an author. And I've been seeing some things on Twitter recently about you've done a lot of things, but I've been seeing you talking about a children's book that you've recently written. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. It's called The Box People. I would love to share that with you at some point because I think it's got a great message. So hopefully after this, we can chat on a way that I can get a copy to you somehow.
Sure.
But the main message is about a community or a society that lives in a box. They live in a condominium. They eat food in a box. All their food's kept in a box, a cold box or refrigerator. They take showers in the box. They drive in their box to work in a box. And then on the weekends, they go to the box to watch movies or go shopping. So they're called the Box People. But one day, this guy kind of gets fed up with that whole life, and he's really stressed and really frustrated, and he takes a walk out to the national park nearby. And he discovers that he feels really good and really connected and really healthy. He's feeling good about himself. And he's like, well, what happened? What's different? And he has sort of a pivotal moment where he realizes there's no boxes out in nature. So, everything in nature is crooked or circular or spiral. It's just straight lines and not boxes for sure. And then he takes that message back to his community, and they all think he's crazy because, there's this taboo about being outdoors. It's dangerous. You're going to get sick. Something's going to happen. Well, they witness from afar that he's pretty happy outdoors, and lo and behold, they join him. And so there's sort of this evolution and revolution in their thinking where they go, oh, we don't have to live our life in boxes. We can be connected to nature. So that's the story in a nutshell, and it's an illustrated children's book. And I developed an activity booklet that goes with it. So I'll be happy to share that with you later, and maybe you can put the link somewhere.
Absolutely.
And hopefully can share a copy with you somehow. But that's the main message. It's all about how can we get out of our boxes. And, all these urban areas, you name it, where I'm from, Atlanta, Georgia, Kuala Lumpur, Manila, Singapore, Jakarta, they all kind of have that box lifestyle.
Oh yeah, Shenzhen, where I'm at, Beijing before that, Kobe, Japan. I called home for 10 years. That was a little bit better, but at the end of the day, and I'll put links to this when you share them with me. I'll put them. We have a Facebook group. I'm going to be creating a brand new Facebook page, just because I find that with experience between Facebook groups and pages, the page seems to find more people seem to find it. I'll also share on Twitter and all those different places and put in the show notes. Yeah. So, Kenny, I'm looking at the time again. I don't want to keep you too much longer. Usually this is a good time for, to wrap things up, and I've got to run off, and my family's planning a birthday lunch for me today. So I got to do something there. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, definitely. I should have said happy birthday at the beginning.
Well, no problem. I'm happy to spend it this way. You know, this is a great way. I get really excited talking to people about the topic. You know, and that's part of the reason why I've made this podcast. It's a great way to just share the joy and the message, and I say grow the movement, but just getting more people outdoors. And getting more teachers, getting people outdoors. And in this case, like you said, such an important piece, getting more parents to get their kids outdoors.
Right. I agree.
Yeah. So, go ahead.
I've definitely enjoyed the chat. I think we're both really excited about it. I'm happy to learn, about you and your background. I think we have a lot in common, and I really appreciate I know it's a lot of work to do a podcast, and I really appreciate you sharing the message. So, keep up the good work.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm going to be doing a big push this year, this new school year, to really to push this podcast out to a bigger audience. Just because I've been as I take more environmental education courses and I see more and more of the need every day, the passion gets lit under me more and more to do more. And podcasting is something I've been doing for about 10 years now, on a lot of different topics, a lot of different kinds of shows, but it's something I know how to do, and it's a great way to spread the message. So let's run with it.
Yes. No, I really appreciate it. I'm honored that you've invited me, and I definitely want to extend the invitation. If you can get to Bali, I'd love to show you around.
Oh, absolutely. It's definitely on the bucket list. That's for sure. And
excellent.
Since the world is opening up, it's definitely a possibility in the near future, or the not so near future, sometime in the future.
Yeah. Hope so.
Cool. And,
thanks so much.
Yeah, no problem. And I'll share, guys, you can follow Kenny on Twitter. And he's on there. He's active on Twitter. I'll share that, information in the show notes as well, and all on the social media when I push this out. And again, thank you so much.
Thank you for a fun, exciting conversation. I really enjoyed it.
All right. Well, a big thank you to Kenny for stopping by the Nature Talks podcast. I was really happy to chat with him, learned a lot from him. One of the things that I love about doing this podcast is I get to be inspired by the people I talk to, and hopefully that moves on to you as well. And now, of course, all the links to the things that Kenny talked about will be in the show notes. That's all of the text underneath the podcast, wherever you listen to us. If it's an Apple Podcasts or in Google or Spotify, you'll see all the information there. You can find Kenny on Twitter at Kenny_Peavy, Peavy. And again, I'll share all these links. He's got a Facebook page. I'll share information about his book, about box people, life in the box, and all of those great things. And again, Kenny, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And all of you out there, go follow Kenny and see the great things he's doing. And again, all those links will be in the show notes. And speaking of show notes, speaking of links, let's talk about a few other things that are happening here with the Nature Talks podcast. It's a new season. We got a new look. And what I would love for all of you to do is help join the Nature Talks podcast community by coming over to our Facebook page. We got a new page. Before I had a group, but I've created a page. It's more accessible. So if you go to facebook.com/Nature Talks podcast, come on over and join the page. It's growing. Lots of information about every episode, current episodes, back episodes, videos up there about things I'm doing. As the page grows, there will be live chats on live videos, links that are relevant to things about ecology, environmental education. This is the Environmental Education Podcast. All of those good things. Now, you can follow me, Kevin O'Shea, on Twitter at Mad for Maple. We do have an Instagram feed with a lot of great pictures. I like to think I am an amateur nature wildlife photographer. There's a lot of stuff up on our Instagram, which is called Shizen Wildlife, Shizen Wildlife. Shizen is the Japanese word for nature. And again, these links will be in the show notes as well. And over there, there's lots of nature photos, lots of things about gardening. I'm an avid gardener. Lots of stuff about how I'm going to be using environmental education at my school. My current school is Sheko International School in Shenzhen. You can see how I'm using gardening and a lot of other things with my kindergarten class and also with other grade levels, and what I'm doing with beekeeping with our high school classes and things like that. I've got my fingers into a lot of different pies. So come over, join the Facebook page. Follow me on Twitter. Follow us on Instagram. There's also videos and live Instagrams and live stuff and photos on Twitter. So I'm very active on all those platforms. So come on over, join the conversation. But I really want to push that Facebook page from the get-go this year because I think we're going to do some pretty cool things over there. Now, of course, you can help the Nature Talks podcast grow by sharing this podcast with other educators that you work with, teachers you work with, people you work with if you work in a university or in a private sector organization. Share with those people. Hopefully you can use this as a form of PD, as a form of inspiration. And yeah, that's it. So share. All of the links will be in the show notes. We're basically everywhere. We're on everything from Spotify to Amazon to Audible to Apple to Stitcher. You name it, we're out there. So share us, help us grow bigger, share the Facebook page, all of that stuff. All right, folks. Well, that was it. Again, one more time, I want to thank Kenny. Stay tuned. Another episode of the Nature Talks podcast is coming your way very soon. We've got a lot of fantastic guests who've already sat down with us a few weeks ago over the summer and had incredible conversations. So stay tuned. New episode coming your way very soon. All right, so my name is Kevin, and I want to thank all of you for taking the time to listen, and I hope you're happy wherever you are in the world. I hope you're healthy, and keep safe.